Welcome to the Tribe of Testimonies. Here you will find conversations with faithful Native American members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, sharing their stories and their love of the Savior. My name's Andrea Hales. I'm Navajo, and I'm glad that you've decided to come and join us today. Today my guest is William Locklear. He is full of energy. When I first talked to him, we were just visiting because he's in law school, and I did law school many years ago, and he just wanted to talk about that. But the more I talked to him, I'm like, will you please be a guest? He's like, I would love to. But he's in law school, and he's working, and he's married with a baby, and he is just full of energy. I don't know how he's working and doing all the things, but he is. And I think that's because the Lord is blessing him. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with him because I certainly did. Yeah, he's great. So enjoy this conversation. I'm on the phone tonight with William Locklear. He reached out to me after an interview that I did on a different podcast, and we have a lot in common and a lot of differences, but I am grateful that he reached out to me, and we already made time to get together. So William, would you introduce yourself in your tribal way as much as possible? If it's in your language, that's great. If not, that's fine, because not everybody speaks their language, and some languages are dead.
You know what? So I'll just really briefly, when I was in the Native Ward in Provo, like Franklin Second Ward, anytime we were asked to give like a testimony or like talk or something, most people will come up and introduce themselves in their tribal language. And of course, it being in Utah, a lot of people were Diné. And so they'd come up, and say like Yate, and like everybody would, nod their head or something. But I'd always get up there and just say, well, we just happened to meet Europeans about 300 years before a lot of other people. So we just say like, what's a happening? Like that's like the most common way to say hello, like in the Lumbee community. Like, what's going on? What's happening?
I love
what's
that.
happening, y'all?
That's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are there any speakers of the language at all left?
Ooh, no. So yeah, the thing about Lumbee people is we're like a conglomeration, I guess you could say, of like a couple different tribes there in eastern North Carolina, like a bunch of smaller groups that all just kind of stuck together.
Uh-huh.
However, one cool thing is a thing that we all speak. You'll know when somebody's Lumbee. You could be in a room full of people, and you'll know if you hear another Lumbee speak that they're Lumbee. And like, it don't matter if they're light as I am, or they're darker skinned like my wife, or even darker than that like some of my cousins. You'll know right off the bat just by how they speak that they're Lumbee, and it's because we speak a dialect of English in our tribal community called Lumbee English. And I didn't learn about that until I didn't know it was like an official recognized dialect until I got to BYU. But there's a certain way that we speak when we're amongst each other, and it's different than how anybody else speaks in the South, how anybody else speaks really in North Carolina, and it's particularly ours. So while we don't have a tribal language anymore, we do have our Lumbee English, which I'm telling you, I'll be in a room and I'll say, oh yeah, there's somebody here that's Lumbee, and I'll go, put my ears out, and sure enough, there'll be somebody there.
I love that so much. That makes me happy, and that's awesome.
I'm telling you.
Okay, so would you share something that you do love about your heritage? It could be a story, a celebration, a way of life, a ceremony, anything that you love about your heritage, especially as it relates to the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. There's so many things, right? But probably the biggest one is just how spiritual we are. You know, that was one thing that blew me away when I first came to Utah was just how many um, church buildings there were because there's so many, right? Like there's a stake in like every neighborhood.
Yeah.
But back home in Pembroke and in Robeson County, especially, there's a lot of churches just in general. A lot of Baptist churches, a lot of Methodist churches, and you know, Lumbee people are renowned in the South for just how dedicated they are to their religions. Um, they have the largest Native American church like in the South is back home. There's like a congregation of like 1,000 people that go to this one particular Baptist church. But I mean, Christianity's been amongst my people since like the 1700s. So like, they're just a really devout people. The just older people can just quote Bible scriptures, just boom, left and right. And just you know, just got a love for the Lord, just in general, and that I think helped the church really take off amongst our people. It's just because not only do we have that Christian base, but then you have the Book of Mormon, and that kind of just puts us into what we're studying. And I mean, it's a natural marriage of both our heritage and our faith. And so I love that so much. Just how much my people love the Lord, just in general.
Oh, that makes me happy too. I love that.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
So, I was able to visit with William yesterday on the phone for a little while. Was it already yesterday?
Yeah,
So I was
yeah.
able to visit with William, and he and I have some things in common. He is in law school right now. He just started, but he is unlike me. I did not work my first year of law school. So, do you want to tell us like how you ended up in law school? If that was like a divinely appointed something or a lifetime goal? Tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I always tell people I'm a point 0.5 L just because I'm just barely starting. But I do love it. And, you know, my dad, who I was raised by mostly, like, he was on the other side of the courtroom when he was like 17, 18. He got sentenced to a long prison term and, you know, served like was in prison in the 70s and part of the 80s. And so that was one thing that I knew that I wanted to help people get a fair shake at justice. Having grown up in situations where I saw people did not, just for whatever reason, you know, whether they might have been in the right or the wrong. I think everybody deserves their chance, you know, at getting justice and getting proper representation.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing I think was, you know, my dad has like a seventh grade education. And he started working and doing other things when he was really young. He didn't have like a lot of parents at home or anything like that. He's raised by his grandma, who was born in 1890. So, you know, just a whole different generation. But when I started living with him, the one book or like the first book he ever recommended to me was a book called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee.
Mm-hmm.
And he just was like, listen, you need to read this book. And I was like, why? You know, I was like 13, 14. He's like, just read it. And so, you know, out of respect for my daddy, I read it and I mean, it just captivated me. Like it broke my heart. Like it made me mad. It made me cry. And that just took me on a journey of just like finding out who I was and finding out about like Native people just in general, like like our collective history in this country. And that kind of coincided with me reactivating into the gospel when I was 15, after having been inactive and my family left the church for like 5 years. I moved to Tennessee, where my dad was living because he's a construction worker, away from tribal territory, which had never left tribal territory really in my life. Um, and a member of the bishopric, uh, really nice guy, he gave me a newspaper clipping of um, a, a BYU professor who had just been appointed the assistant secretary to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and it was Larry Eckelhawk. He's like, you should read about this guy. This bishopric member said this, and I was 15. I didn't know the first thing about the BIA or the Department of the Interior, or really any government agency. But I read that, and I was like, really read into his life, and I spent a lot of time at the library during that time because I didn't have nothing else to do. And I was like, that's the kind of impact I want to have. Like, that's the way I want to help my people. Like, and I want to do it by like fighting for them and like getting the right kind of education. And, nobody in my house had graduated high school. But I knew that I had to do something different. And so that's what got it started, really. I was like, I want to go to law school. I want to do tribal law. I want to help out Indian tribes all over, my people included, but, really any folks that either look like us or talk like us or think like us. Because, I know I don't look like most folks out in the West. And I don't even look a lot like a lot of people where I'm from. But growing up in like a tribal situation, like a tribal community, there's shared trauma, there's shared problems. And I just want to be able to help my people. Like, that's it. I want to devote my life to it. And so it's just kind of guided me. And I'm on my way. I'm a little bit closer today than I was yesterday, but I still got a long way to go. Some of these classes is killing me.
Yeah.
But it's all good.
So you're married too, right?
Yes, ma'am.
How long have you been married?
I've been married for 6 years.
Do you want to tell us anything about your marriage, or
Yeah,
you don't have to? This is
no. I don't mind at all. I'm happily married. I was if you've ever known, well, anybody listening has ever known any Lumbees to go to BYU, we have a reputation that kind of precedes us a little bit, especially when it comes to how social we are and, how we like to have fun and like to have a good time and things like that. And I most certainly fall in that same lineage of people that have come from where I come from and go to BYU, because there's been Lumbees at BYU since like the 70s. And I was one of those types of people. I got home from my mission and just wanted to have a lot of fun and wanted to just go out and go to parties and, just lived a life. I just gotten home and things like that, and had 4 or 5 people from back home that would be around me. And so I frequented a lot of the events and things for the multicultural office. I got involved pretty heavily with the Tribe of Many Feathers, like all the events and like planning powwow and, doing leadership positions and helping Miss LeVay any way that I could. Miss LeVay talk. And so, I thought that I knew just about every girl that I was possibly interested in that had something to do with the MSS office, like in terms of like dating or like getting to know. But then there was this girl who like commented on a picture of my cousin's and was like, I didn't know that Nick Jonas was coming to BYU or something like that. And I didn't even know who Nick Jonas was. I had no clue because I didn't really listen to that kind of music. But I clicked on her profile and I was like, she goes to BYU. I've never seen her before, because she's blessed with melanin, unlike myself. And so I thought I knew every melanin blessed girl at BYU. I figured I did, but I didn't know her. And so, I was spending some time with a mutual friend and I seen this girl come up on her Snapchat. And I was like, hey, what's her name? She's like, oh, this is Jessica. I went to middle school with her. I was like, man, give me her number. Just straight up, just like that. And she's like, I'll ask her, And so she sent her a message and was just like, he said that he wants to get your number. And my wife, Jessica, was just like, well, I don't get down like that. You can send him my number. And so got her number, and we texted, and we got to know each other, and that was at the end of February. And by the middle of March, I had asked her dad if I could date her. And he's a pretty solid, typical Latino guy. He's from Mexico. He's like, I really like that. I really respect that. Like, I appreciate that. And so, we started dating, and sooner or later, I realized, like, it was the first time in my life I was like, man, like, I wouldn't mind if my youngins was like her. She's smart and beautiful, and she was working at the MTC and fixing to graduate from BYU. I was like, man, I can't do no better than this. And so I asked her to marry me. I felt good about it, and she said yes. And the folks was happy, and it's been great. We got married in the Provo Temple because she's from Provo, born and raised. Um, it's been a challenge because we both come from divorce, and we both are just trying. I'm Lumbee and she's Mexican, and it's different cultures and things like that. But we're both indigenous, and we're both proud of who we are, and like, so it's come with challenges. But I'm telling you, it's been well worth it, especially with the birth of my child, Carolina, who was aptly named for both where I'm from, and because Carolina is pretty easy to pronounce in Spanish. Um, but it's been worth it, and we're working on it every day, and it's a lot better now than it was that first year, like they always say. But the Lord always makes a way. Um, he does, and even when it don't seem like there's no way, even when it seems like, man, how in the world am I gonna make it through this? He makes a way, and that's certainly been the case in my marriage and in my life. But yeah, you probably didn't ask for all of that, but
No, that's
hey, I'm
awesome.
I'm I'm happy to share it because it's the truth. I've been blessed, and Jessica is super honest and super dedicated to the gospel, and she's such a grounded person. And I always say she's my yin and yang, not just because I'm lighter and she's darker, but also because like she's just got a good head on her shoulders. And when I can't think straight, she gets me right, and she's actually the one that like pushed me to study for the LSAT. She's like, get in there and study, boy. You ain't been studying. And so I'm just thankful for her. And I know that it was the Lord that brought us together.
Yeah.
Even though it was Snapchat that technically did, it was the Lord for sure.
Was the Lord, not Snapchat.
That's right. That's right.
uh, so you've been through some hard things in your life. What are some of them, and how did you get through them, and what have you learned from them?
Yeah. I appreciate you asking that. So, I was born and raised in the same house that my great great grandparents were born and raised in Pembroke, North Carolina. And Robinson County, North Carolina, is one of the poorest counties in the country. Not unlike many tribal communities. Lots of crime, lots of violence, lots of drug usage, just really rough stuff. Lots of poverty. Um, and I guess humble beginnings is what a lot of people call it. But I'm learning to talk about it in a way that's constructive, because for a long time in my life, I just didn't want nobody to have pity on me. I didn't want nobody to feel bad for me. But I really believe that like the things that we go through, trials are relative.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have some of those typical, I guess you could say, native kind of problems growing up. I grew up on the dirt road. The house didn't have running water. I had to walk to school a lot. Went to bed hungry a lot. Saw a lot of. My dad was gone working a lot, so I lived with my mom. And during those times, um, my family kind of fell apart and left the church, and my mom got into some other kind of things, and we moved into like public housing there in the town of Pembroke, and my sisters got into a lot of different kind of things, and I was kind of left alone. for a long time, and just saw crazy things and just experienced a lot of wild things and things that I would not want my child to go through.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad that I went through them for that purpose. Um, then my parents got officially divorced in 2003, and it was like 2 months after we had gotten sealed. So it was crazy.
Oh.
I was not expecting that. Like I didn't know exactly what the sealing ceremony was and what it was about, but I of course had sung primary songs and knew those kinds of things. Um, but after they got divorced, my family just completely left the church. My dad officially moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, which is like 6 hours away from Pembroke. My mom was living there, just kind of navigating the situation. She being a white lady from Indiana amongst all these native people, that would present problems from time to time. She's just trying to figure it out, and she's got 3 kids. Um, and for a long time, you know, we all just kind of had to figure it out. Then in 2006, when I was 13, I came to visit my dad in Tennessee. And, just my dad taught me how to hang drywall because that's kind of a popular trade amongst the Lumbee people, is doing drywall, sheetrock, they call it. Um, and I wanted to come back home, but I remember uh, asking my mom, "Hey, like I'm ready to come back home," and it kind of was this thing like, "Well, there's not really a home for you to come back to. Like you're kind of at home, so you just got to like figure it out." And so there I was, like in here in Knoxville, like had never been like in no big old city before. Like Pembroke, I think the biggest building in Pembroke, I think is like the bank, and it's like 2 or 3 levels high. Like there's like the university there, but kind of separate from the town itself. Um, and so I didn't know a thing about like skyscrapers. I didn't know a thing really about like white culture. I know it sounds kind of strange, but I'd never lived around white or black people. Um, and so I was living in like the Mechanicsville community here in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is like a historically black area, in a motel with my sister. I got 2 older sisters, and we were in one room. It was like a rough kind of motel, like where a lot of weird things would go on, and just had to figure it out, And I remember distinctly, I prayed a lot during those times. Just prayed to like be safe. Just prayed to feel God's presence. And during those times, I always say that God speaks to us however we know to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes he'll speak to me in Lumbee English sometimes.
Yeah.
But sometimes he'll come through to me in like music. And I remember the song that would play on the TV, because we had one of them just a little TV. This is before plasma screens were really popular and big. There's just a little TV in the room there, and the song by Alicia Keys, the one that would go like "Everything's gonna be all right," like that would come on when I would pray sometimes, and it just made me feel okay, like everything's gonna be all right, like don't worry about it. And so I'd hear that, and I'd walk to my bus stop, and I'd feel okay, like, and I knew everything would turn out. Even with how crazy Knoxville was back in the mid 2000s, which that's a topic for another podcast or a topic for another day. Just was crazy place. And then later on, my dad got sick. Complications from both just a hard life, like some of the things he had done when he was earlier, well, like when he was younger, but also like complications from like diabetes and heart problems and things, and then the housing crisis happened, and he was a construction worker, and ran out of work, and we was facing homelessness. And he, just kind of told me, well, I'm going down to the mission home, like the Salvation Army. And he's like, well, I don't, you got to figure it out. And I had to figure it out again. But somehow, like the Lord made a way. Like we found ways to eat, we found ways to sleep where we needed to sleep. And then not too long after that, I decided to come back to church. Like it was in 2009. I was sitting at home one Sunday morning, and my dad had been young men's president. My mama was young women's president at one time. Um, really active with the missionaries. Like I started going out with missionaries when I was like, and I don't think they might not have been allowed to do this, but I was like 6 or 7, like going knocking on doors of missionaries for real. Like it was crazy, but I was really involved with all that kind of stuff. I'd bear my testimony every Sunday and stuff, but this had been at this point like, and I'm sorry I'm jumping back and forth, but I'll get you straight. This had been like 5 or 6 years at this point that like had not been going to church, and I just woke up one morning and I was like, man, like if I die today, I might go to hell. Like I had that thought, even though like that's the farthest thing from like what we believe. But I just prayed. I was like, help me figure it out. Like help me like to get where I need to be. And I'll be doggone if like a week later, the young men's president, who's now the bishop here in the ward where I'm at, and one of the young men who was a football player at the high school, come knocking on my door. They said, we've never heard of you. Like, who are you? And like, would you like to come to church? And I said, well, I don't really know about coming to church on Sunday. They said, well, will you come on Wednesday? Because that was like mutual night.
Yeah.
They said, we just play basketball. Like, that's all you got to do. Because I was like, I don't know about no Boy Scouts. I ain't into that. I'll go camping, but I'm just not into all that. Like, I don't know about all the Boy Scout stuff, but I'll play basketball. And they're like, all right, then just come and like, we'll pick you up. Like they made sure to set the time and let me know that they was coming to shore. And so I went on Wednesday night and I had a good time, and yeah, it kept going for a couple of weeks. They said, do you want to come on Sunday? I said, I might as well. I've been coming here for, I ain't got no other reason. I ain't got a reason not to. So I did, and I didn't even have like a tie. I didn't have like a white shirt and stuff. So I think the elders or somebody like give me a tie and like help me tie it, or maybe a member. But I remember sitting on the back pew by myself. Didn't know anybody in the ward, and my dad was like, I'm not going. This is what he said, and I'll just quote him. He's just like, I don't know about going to no white people's ward. Like, I just don't know about that. He was just so used to going to church in Pembroke, at the Pembroke ward with people that he knew and fellow Lumbee people. He felt uncomfortable going amongst them here in Knoxville. But I was like, well, you don't have to. Like, I'm just going to go because I felt good. And so I'd come home, and I was trying to be sneaky, but I didn't want to offend him because at that time he was very capable of disciplining me. And so I would just leave a pamphlet, the little handout on the kitchen table. And if he picked it up and read it or something like that, or asked me about it, I'd say, oh yeah, I felt so good going to church today. I felt so good taking the sacrament today. Or I felt so good passing the sacrament today. Just letting him get worked on, Well, a little bit after that, because that was in like August, in like January or December, I think it was, I wanted to get my patriarchal blessing because it was something that, I knew my parents had done, but I wanted it.
Yeah.
And I'd never met the patriarch, of course, because I just barely started affiliating with the members of the church here in Knoxville. But the patriarch in the blessing, he hit on some things that, I mean, there's no other way but to say that it was revelation. Um, he talked about my family, and he specifically said, because of what you're doing, your dad will come to full activity, or he'll come back to full activity. He didn't say that about my mom or my sister or anybody else, but he specifically said, because of that, your dad will, and he did. He did. Like a month and a half or 2 months later, he read my patriarchal blessing. He started crying, and that freaked me out because my dad's he's a tough dude, and he is not the kind of guy that cries, or at least he wasn't back then. I think he's a little older now, so he's starting to soften up. But back then, he was tough as nails, and he did not shed tears. Not that there's anything wrong with shedding tears, um, but he did not. But he did that day. He's like, oh man, and he hadn't been wearing his garments. Like he hadn't been doing the things that he knew he should be doing, and he turned things around quick, and decided to come back to church and come with me, and he was made elders quorum president and ward mission leader for a long time, and now he's a high priest. And I turned things around in school literally that same year. Like, I started caring more about school and applying myself more to school, and I went to BYU and served a mission and come home and all that. Got married in the temple, trying to do my best. And he's still very, very active in church. And it's, his health's not great, like, and he's still battling through that. But he has a very firm testimony of the gospel. And he's went through rougher things than me and been through way worse things. And so, having him there really strengthened me, especially about the power of the atonement. Like, he always would say, well, if the Lord cares about me, I know he cares about you, because he ain't got no reason to care about me, so to speak. But yeah, that's kind of the whole journey in a nutshell of like how we got there. And it's been tough. As people back home say, it's been a hard road to hoe, but somebody had to do it. But I'm glad that the Lord was there helping me along the way, for sure.
Yeah. That's an amazing story, William. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Yeah. So, switching gears, what is a tender mercy that you've received recently from the Lord that is not too personal to share? What's something that you've noticed that the Lord is daily in your life or paying attention to you as a individual?
Yeah. Now, Andrew, I'll tell you, there's no such thing as too personal for me. I'll tell you anything you want to know, and I'll give you an honest answer. That's pretty typical of the culture I was raised in. We try to be pretty straightforward and, just tell people whatever they ask. But to answer your question, and it's a good one, a tender mercy I've seen is just a lot of grace that I've been given by the people around me. I am a very social person, and I'm a very friendly person. I try to be, at least. I try to be very social and joke around and have fun. But in those private moments, when I'm here, like in my office, either working or studying for school or just thinking, I have this tendency to isolate myself from everybody. And that's probably something that if anybody listens to this and they know me, they'd be surprised to hear that, I'm sure. But due to things, and I try not to dwell on it, but due to the things that have happened to me when I was younger and just different experiences I've had, I have a hard time trusting people. I have a hard time giving people an opportunity to let me down, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put up a guard I'll put up a defense to really let people in. And so a tender mercy I've seen is just being around people that completely changed that perspective for me. My wife being one of them for sure. Uh, you know, she went through some really traumatic things in her youth, and has every reason to be that way towards anybody. But she is not. You know, she gives people chance after chance after chance. The same thing with um, Elder Echo Hawk himself. You know, I spent a couple of days with him. He, I don't know how, miraculously came out and spoke to the law school after I sent him an email just asking him to do so. And spending some days with him and talking with him, he's another person who he's one of my personal heroes, but he has every reason to not trust people like the way that I feel, like, and even more so because things that he went through in his life. And he's just not like that. Like he loves openly, and like he's kind and he's friendly, and he has that Christ-like love, and you feel the spirit so strong when you're around him. And so those to me are tender mercies, because I mean, to be frank, like I just didn't have that growing up. You know, it was, and I think I said it a lot unintentionally, but it was one of them things where you just figured it out. I mentioned that my dad was raised by his grandma, and it's because his dad died in 1962, you know, and then his grandpa died in 1968. So he didn't really have many people, and then he was institutionalized when he was 17, um, and went through his things. So he kind of had to figure it out himself. And so I never really, even though my dad is a great person, you know, and I love him to death, um, he kind of had to figure it out, and so did I. So getting that grace from people, like being willing to ask people for things, being willing to ask people for a favor, being willing to ask people a question when you don't know something. Those were not things that I was raised doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you couldn't afford something, it weren't yours. You weren't good enough to have it. If you didn't know something, you either better get in them books and teach yourself, or unfortunately, it just wasn't in the cards for you to know. That's kind of how I came up. But that is a blessing to have that paradigm just completely broken and shifted and changed. Especially now that I'm in school, you know, and I do not know hardly anything that's going on. I got to ask questions and got to rely on people. Um, so I would say that just learning that skill, because it's the people that have it, man. I'm envious of y'all.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
So you served a mission?
Yeah.
Did you have a testimony of the Book of Mormon before your mission, or when you went on your mission? When did you gain your own testimony of the Book of Mormon?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I love the Book of Mormon. I really do. I first read it when I was really young, because I've been reading for a long time, and reading has always been one of them things that I did to kind of get away
Mm-hmm.
from everything that was going on. I think I might have set the record at my elementary school for like the most books read in a year or something like that. People said.
Yeah.
But I just always loved reading. Like, and even when I lived in some of these rough places, I'd go to whatever the closest library was, and just spend time there, just because I could. This was before I had access to Wikipedia, and now my wife will tell you she has to get my attention because I'll be 50 pages deep in Wikipedia just reading about like the fall of the Byzantine Empire or something like that. You know, like
The
just
rabbit hole.
yeah, old man, you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you got an inquisitive mind too, so you know how it is. But the Book of Mormon itself, like I read it when I was young, just because it was what was being taught to me, and I was interested to be able to contribute to like Sunday school classes or primary classes, or conversations with missionaries and things like that. But when I got older, and really like wanted to know about who I was, and I'm sure that this echoes a lot of other people, particularly in our demographic in the church. The whole tribe of testimonies. I think many of the tribe would probably say that this, rings true to them too. But having a place in the gospel really meant something to me. Um, Being able to read about who I would consider to be some of my ancestors um, really meant a lot to me. But it really was when I was in the MTC in 2012, because I was in the MTC when they announced the age change for missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
It was a revolutionary time in missionary work, but it was a crazy time to be in the MTC. But when I was in there, Elder Echo Hawk spoke. That's when he got called to be a 70, a member of the 70. And he spoke directly to us that day. Like he talked about how we are part of the, last remnant of the house of Israel, and talked about how the Book of Mormon was for us. And like, I just, because I'd been following his career like obsessively, just what he had been doing like in the secular world for so many years, um, I saw my hero up there at General Conference talking to me. And what's crazy is he came and spoke at the MTC like a week or 2 weeks after. And I was there listening to him, crying and just like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So I had to thank him. Like I had to. And so I was talking to my companion. I'm like, hey, when he says amen, and that prayer ends, we're going to the front of that line and we're just going to say, hey. He's like, oh, Antiano, that's Italian for elder. Like, Antiano, I don't know. Like, we should get back. And I was like, no. You come with me and we'll get up there and we'll just go back to class real quick. So, prayer ends, Elder Eckhart gets up. I take off to the front and my companion comes with me. And the MTC security was like, hold on, where are you going, Elder? And I was like, I need to say hey to that man right there. And he's like, no. And I'm like clamoring, like I'm like at like a rock star concert or something. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
no, please, you don't understand. Like, please. And so Elder Eckhart, I guess he was watching all this go down and almost saw a elder get tossed out of the NTC auditorium. He comes over, and he's like, what's going on? And the guy's like, he says he wants to say hello to you. And he's like, well, let him say hello. He's like, I'll just go, So I did, and I said, Elder Eckhart, it's such an honor to meet you, first off. And second off, I heard about you like 4 years ago when I was really young, and the things you've done for Native people are so incredible. Thank you so, like just going through my little thing, like couldn't breathe, like I'm like starstruck and all stuff. And he just comes up close and looks at my name tag, and then he looks up at me, and he looks at my name tag real close again, and he looks up at me. He's like, Locklear. And I was like, yep. He's like, are you from Pembroke, North Carolina? I was like, yep. He's like, are you Lumbee? I said, oh, yep. And he's like, oh, man, I know about y'all. And he like named off a couple people from back home. And I was like, that's my auntie, that's my cousin. He's like, oh, man. And we're talking and stuff. And this security guard just he realized, like, let me take a step back real quick and just let him have a little moment. And my companion is just like smiling real big because I had already been talking about this since Elder Eckhart spoke in General Conference, like about how much it meant. And he comes in real close to me, and he says, Elder, you're going to Italy? I was like, yeah. He's like, and he says it's super low. He's like, take them people our book. Like, teach them about our book. And that, Andrea, I'm sorry, meant so much to me. It meant so much to me. And like, even in the times when I was in Italy and like I hadn't heard from my family in a long time because my dad, he don't have a computer. So he would email me when he would be able to go to somebody else's house, or like if I called and he didn't answer, for like Christmas or Mother's Day. Like when I was alone or felt lonely or something like that, I would just think back to that moment. Um, and that, I mean, it just solidified it for me. I was like, that's why I'm here. Like I'm here to like teach people about what my ancestors went through and like what they experienced and like how it could change you and like how it could change them and how it changed me. Like it brought me out of this rough spot that I was in, you know, and just allowed me to be here in Italy, like of all places. I might be the only Lumbee that's ever been in some of them places. Um, and I wasn't supposed to be there. Like I wasn't supposed to make it past like, I don't know, I think it's like 25 or 26 or something for like the people in my little community and things like that, like giving, divorced parents, single parent home and on welfare and food stamps and Section 8 and all that mess. Like I wasn't supposed to be there, but the Book of Mormon made a way for me. And so, it just really solidified my view on the gospel and like how central it is to who I am. And like even in moments where like I've had difficulty since, um, I've always just still turned back to that day, that moment, like that experience because it just meant so much to me. And so, you know, I I love it. I love the Book of Mormon. I do because it talks about us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I love that. I have one last question for you.
Of course.
What does it mean to you to know that you belong to the tribe of Israel? And you've answered this a lot, but
So when I got my patriarchal blessing, I didn't know too much about what those were. I didn't know about the different 12 tribes and things just because I wasn't well versed in like the Old Testament. In the South, we're a little more versed in the New Testament. And I just remember people saying, well, you'll go in there and you'll probably be Ephraim, from the tribe of Ephraim, because that's most members of the church are adopted from Ephraim, and like this was here in Tennessee. Um, I didn't know any connections between anything besides like, well, the Book of Mormon talks about like on the first page how some of them's ancestors of American Indians and things like that. But I got in there and the guy said, well, the patriarch, he said that I was from the tribe of Manasseh. And I had never heard really of Manasseh in my life. But I talked to a member that was in our ward, and he was from Bolivia. And I talked with another member, she was from Colombia. And they were like, you're from Manasseh? And I was like, yeah. Like the guy said I was a descendant of Manasseh. And he's like, do you know who else came from Manasseh? I was like, no. He said, Lehi came from Manasseh. And I was like, dang, for real? And he's like, yeah. He's like, so of course that makes sense. And I'm not like a Book of Mormon scholar or anything. I'll leave that to some of my professors at BYU. But I mean, that was just another, like, it just made it so much more evident to me, like who I was. And knowing that, like, and in my patriarchal blessing, it said that I needed to read about Manasseh, but also like the promises made to Abraham and Jacob and Isaac, because those same promises are given to us, specifically. Like, and then hearing that talk from Elder Echo Hawk in 2012, it just is the hammering point. Like, we are part of that chosen people. We're part of that blessed people, and we spoke about it, on our telephone call. But those promises extended to those guys, posterity that would every seed would be like a grain of sand on the ocean or something like that. I think it says like blessings of, a great family and blessings of, mansions being prepared in the next life. Talks about all that, but it also talks about blessings in this life, temporal blessings and like ways that we'll be looked after. I said a lot about figuring it out, but a lot of the figuring out is already done for us as long as we live up to those choice blessings that we've already been given. And, I had said this to you yesterday as well, but sometimes that choice blessing meant that I had a meal to eat that night. And sometimes that choice blessing meant that I got into law school. Like, and I'm not saying I'm special or nothing great or amazing, but I can tell you this, when I've given my best effort to follow the gospel as close as I can, life has just gone better for me. And that's just a fact. And I can't deny that.
Yeah.
And I think I think it's inseparably tied to that blessing given to my ancestors, the house of Israel.
Yeah.
It's like, as long as you live by the gospel and as long as you do the things that you know you're supposed to do, the Lord will provide that ram in the thicket. He'll provide the things that you don't even know how it's going to happen or where it came from or what it is. He'll provide. And
Yeah.
that's been a fact for me. Absolute fact.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, and I thank you for your enthusiasm and for all the joy that you've shared with us, and thank you for your time.
Well, I'm happy to do it, and I appreciate what you're doing again. I mean that. I think this is so important for our people, just because we need anything we can get to uplift us, and I think that this is just so crucial and so great, and I appreciate you doing it.
Thanks. Today is Monday, the Monday before Thanksgiving, and I recorded that with William a couple days ago. I'm thankful for Thanksgiving. I love that we have Christmas where people, as a general whole, seem to want to give to people. I'm grateful for Easter, where it seems like it's turned towards the Savior, and they should both be turned towards the Savior, of course. I definitely agree with that. But I love Thanksgiving in the fact that it just is making our hearts full of gratitude. And I have mentioned that before, that I just really like the feeling of being grateful for things, for people and for the blessings in my life. So indulge me for a second. I'm going to sing to you. If you don't like my voice, then you've been listening to me long enough. You like my voice. I'm just going to sing the first verse. Because I have been given much, I too must give. Because of thy great bounty, Lord, each day I live. I shall divide my gifts from thee with every brother that I see, who has the need of help from me. I am grateful for you, and I hope that my small portion of my testimony that I share with you is something that you are grateful for. I am grateful for a Savior. I'm grateful for the opportunity to know Him in this lifetime. I'm grateful for the Book of Mormon. I'm grateful for a living prophet. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for a supporting husband who encourages me. I'm grateful for parents who are the best parents. I'm grateful for my ward and all the wards that I've been in, who have cared for me and loved me and helped me grow through the ages. I am just so grateful, and I want you to know that, and I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. And now I have 2 things to share with you. First of all, this morning I was able to go sit in Elder Larry Echohawk's home and interview him. And some of my friends that I've made through this Tribe of Testimonies podcast, we are working on sharing videos with you once a month. That's our goal. And we are excited that Elder Echohawk was our first guest. We hope to have it up by Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and I'm really excited about that. We will have a prayer from my friend who lives in Maryland, from the Washington, D.C. area. He's going to offer the opening prayer. And then Kyle Forsyth, who does the music for the podcast, he actually plays a hymn for us on the flute. And then Elder Echohawk and I visit. I hope that you join us in that devotional, because it's a devotional of gratitude and love and learning to know the Savior and hearing Him. So I hope you now will look forward to that. The second thing that I have to share with you is Christmas is coming up. My goal for the year was 50 interviews. I'm pretty close to that. Or 50 episodes, let's say that. I would like to do an episode where you share your Christmas story with me, that we can share it with others. So there's two ways I am asking for that. You can email me. I can be reached on Facebook, on Instagram, or tribeoftestimonies@gmail.com. Or you can record yourself telling the story, and I can splice those together for a podcast episode. I hope you share with us, and I hope that we can have a really nice Christmas episode. So those are my two things that are really exciting. I'm so grateful for all of you, and I hope you have a super wonderful, awesome day. Tribe of Testimonies is not affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The music is a traditional hymn, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, arranged and performed by Kyle Forsyth. If you know someone who might be interested in being a guest, please reach out to me at tribeoftestimonies@gmail.com.